How about it not being religion but something else, like for example,
yeah, anything. It's kind of the word religion here is just an example.
Yeah, just like
the word sword is an example. It could be a sword, it could be a club.
Because religion is kind of centered around fear in its own way.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I mean, religion would be one example, and religions are different. Anthropologists tell me that hunter-gathering religions are very different. That hunter-gathering religions are not necessarily centered around fear, or at least not centered around fear in the same way. But so you know, it's an open question. But the idea is, again, the word religion, like belief in God or the supernatural, is not important at all. You could have like a secular analogy of religion. It's just the idea that, you know, society coerces you into being a productive citizen regardless, you know, of what is good for you. And it's like, again, you know, let me give you a very concrete example. Like Marx and Foucault are going to say that our society is deeply exploitative. Our society is deeply exploitative. But you might not believe that. You're economics students. This is modern economics, modern neoclassical economics is the ideology of today. No, it's all free market exchange. Well, free market exchange, my ass. How many people who participate in the free market exchange actually participate freely and not on the pain of hunger? As great German economist Max Weber has put it. That, you know, the whip of hunger is actually what drives most of economic transactions, but whatever. Let's go back to this example. So you might not believe me that capitalism is exploitative. Let's talk about feudalism. You probably will agree that feudalism is exploitative, right? And the feudal arrangement, when you have, you know, people who are legally owned by other people whose persons and labor is legally owned by other people, right? We would agree that feudal arrangement is deeply exploitative, right? And so you have a set of ideas, and this set of ideas says that the lords have the right to command the serfs. The lords have the right to command the serfs. Maybe this right derives from God or gods. Then it would be religion. Or maybe it derives from something else. So in this case, you could have a feudal arrangement which is based on some form of ideology, which is not necessarily religious. But I mean, it's like you can have ideology which is not religious in form, but you know, you understand, misrepresenting in practice. Actually, so it kind of depends on what you mean by religion, because Karl Marx famously called our contemporary liberal constitution religious. He said that in the same fashion how we are all suffering and damned in reality, but we are saved in Christ, theoretically. Like practically we are slaves, but theoretically we are saved and free in Christ. Marx says the same thing. In practice, most of us have to work under the coercive laws of market competition, but in theory, in the liberal constitution, which may be secular, we are all free, right? So, and Marx said that, you know, it's like, you understand, that there's a kind of religiosity to a secular constitution. So it kind of depends on what you mean by the word religion. The word religion, I don't think is very well defined. I think that the word religion, I may be wrong, but I think the word religion in Latin just means ritual. So it's like, what does it even mean? I mean, like so many people don't believe in God, but does it mean they don't have religion? It's like, you know, people believe in all sorts of irrational things. So many, like you could call yourself an atheist and yet religiously believe in science. So it's like, you know, I don't think that these words are necessarily very well defined. I feel like in general, this is one of the tasks of intellectual education, to see complexity where other people see simplicity. In the same fashion how Christianity is not one thing, but actually there's, do you know how many denominations of Christianity there are? One? Like Lutherans, Calvinists, Orthodox. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 40,000. There's 40,000 denominations of Christianity, at least. It's probably more, appearing every day. It's like, it's not one thing. It's 40,000 different ways of reading the Bible. In fact, do you know that different Christians include different books in the Bible and translate them in different ways? There were ancient Christians who had Plato in their Bible. So it's like, you know, who decides what is the true Christianity? The Roman Emperor? You think? You think the Roman Emperor somehow has hotline to God? It's a good question. I mean, historically, that's the person who decided which books are going to be in the Bible. This is historically for the vast majority of denominations. But do we think that the Roman Emperor somehow knew better than those guys who had Plato in their Bible? They are from Nag Hammadi. Do you think that somehow the Roman Emperor knew better than the monks of Nag Hammadi what to include in the Bible? I'm not sure. So it's like, the word religion here is not well defined. In fact, I should erase it and I should write instead of it ideology. And of course, the question is, how do you ever know that you have gotten rid of ideology? How do you ever know? And when I talk about hedonism, of course, it's not clear what does it mean to be happy. And it's very possible for human beings to believe that they are happy or that something will make them happy, but in fact they are miserable or they do something that makes them miserable. So it's like it's a work in progress. In fact, again, somebody like Buddha or somebody like Epicurus would say it is an art, and it's a very difficult art of becoming happy. It's like, becoming happy is a little bit like becoming healthy. Like in theory we know what is health, but how exactly do you become healthy? What counts as healthy food? What counts as healthy regimen? Or like, it's like, huh?
Happy is health. I don't think so. Happy.
No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying happiness is a little bit like health. Happiness is a little bit like health in the sense that we think that we know what is happiness. We think that we know what is health. But actually, it's very possible to make mistakes as to what's going to make you happy, or to make mistakes as to what's going to make you healthy. So I'm just trying to underscore that actually becoming happy could be super difficult and will take a lifetime. Again, Buddha spent, I don't know, maybe 70 years meditating. And did he actually achieve lasting happiness at the end of it? I'm not sure. I don't know. It's a complicated question. Epicurus, by all accounts, was like a very self-controlled person. But he was dying of cancer in horrible pain. It's like, it was not his choice. Like, we want to be happy, we want to be healthy, but then things happen to us, and can we really control them? I mean, the ideal it's very interesting because Buddha didn't know about Epicurus, Epicurus didn't know about Buddha. You might have heard of Epicurus. Epicurus is a younger contemporary of Aristotle from the city of Athens. Epicurus is actually, it's like, especially after the scientific revolution, because Epicureans were materialists and atomists, Epicureans actually became very popular. Like utilitarianism, modern utilitarianism has roots in Epicureanism. John Stuart Mill called himself an Epicurean. Thomas Jefferson called himself an Epicurean. So Epicurus is actually a very prominent figure in history of Western philosophy. But it's like, even though Epicurus didn't know about Buddha and Buddha didn't know about Epicurus, their solution is kind of the same. It's like you have to struggle with yourself to acquire control over yourself, and through internal discipline you learn to overcome your desires, and also you control, let's say through meditation, you learn to control urges of the body, and also to bracket out pain. Because nobody can expect to survive without pain. It's like, you and me in this room, probably gonna die. I don't mean to upset you so early in the morning, but it's probably going to happen, and it's high chance it's not going to be a pleasant experience, right? But the sort of the ideal of a philosopher dying, and Epicurus is one, Buddha is another, definitely Seneca is another famous example of a person dying with equanimity, serenity, calmness, tranquility, right? Who else? David Hume, one of my favorite philosophers of all time, also dying of horrible disease in great pain, but presumably by all accounts, by accounts of his biographers, keeping equanimity up until the end of life. And again, it's very interesting because this word I keep using, equanimity, calmness, serenity, tranquility. Notice it's very different from efficiency. If you are calm, you're not necessarily efficient. So if you're like real Buddhism doesn't survive very well, because real Buddhism is doesn't kind of it's antisocial, I want to say. So the popular forms of Buddhism are not really Buddhism. There's this interesting logic of transmission of ideas. Buddhism needs to be domesticated before it can become, let's say, an official imperial religion. So in some sense, by definition, the Buddhism that becomes popular is not the real Buddhism. Anyway, it's interesting. I meant to talk about this word serenity or tranquility or calmness because the Greeks use the word ataraxia, which can be translated as freedom from perturbation, freedom from disturbance, and the Buddhists in Sanskrit, I mean Buddha spoke Pali, but whatever. Later Buddhists spoke Sanskrit. In Sanskrit you use the word nirvana, which means something like calmness or tranquility. Literally means extinguishing. Something like that, right? So Robert Wright, whom I should probably refer to. Robert Wright has a wonderful course on Coursera called Buddhist Psychology or something like that. I forget. And I disagree with so many things with Wright. I think Wright doesn't understand this picture, but he does understand at least one thing. He calls Buddhism rebellion against natural selection, and I think he's right. Because if you become a successful Buddhist and achieve nirvana, you don't get your genes into the next generation. In fact, you don't even get your memes into the next generation. It's like true Buddhists will not teach. it's like they won't have disciples. So it's like their lineage is going to end with them, and you will not know about them because they will not advertise their views. They will calmly and tranquilly achieve nirvana in their own head, and that's going to be the end of them. So and by the way, I keep saying that the three most important philosophers for me, especially this year, but over the past 20 years, but especially this year, are Buddha, Marx, and Foucault. But the day where I truly, pledge my allegiance to Buddha is the day when I'm not going to come to class. So it's like you hear me talk about these things only because I have not yet understood and internalized Buddhism enough. I'm in the middle of my path.
Maybe you'll find tranquility in teaching.
Does this look tranquil to you?
I don't know.
Let me tell you, it doesn't feel tranquil at all. Notice also, it's a very interesting notion because I talk about the Sprachlichkeit, right? So you have genes and you have memes which exist in your head and take control of your behavior, right? It's like, do I speak a language or does the language speak through me? You see? Nietzsche and Foucault are going to talk about ideology, how in some sense certain linguistic discourses take control of your head over and above your free and conscious choice, right? And Daniel Dennett says the same thing. He has a wonderful article in Cambridge Companion to Darwin. The article is called In Darwin's Wake, Who Am I? And Dennett says, it's like, am I Daniel Dennett writing this article? And then it says, no, of course not. I've had so many teachers. I've read so many books. It's actually like it's a regurgitation of all of this past experience. It's not exactly me speaking this, but it is a certain genealogical lineage that speaks through me right now. These words I have not invented. Even these concepts I have not invented. I have picked them up. And there's a logical reason of transmission. Transmission of ideas is not innocent. Transmission of ideas is not innocent. It's a completely irrelevant random example, but let me give it nonetheless. It's like, for thousands of years, Plato was read as a proto-Christian. For thousands of years, Plato was read as a proto-Christian. Because Plato is a proto-Christian, I think nothing can be further from the truth. If you read Plato's dialogues, if anything, Plato is an anti-Christian. But he was read as a proto-Christian because it was the Christians who did the transmission of Platonic dialogues. And so therefore, nothing should be surprising there. Let me just say for the record, especially for first-year students, if I'm actually going to upload this anywhere, Plato died before Jesus' grandma was born, just for the record, because very often students are unaware of that. The Bible is a very young book. Homer's Iliad is probably older than the Hebrew Bible, than the Old Testament, probably. I mean, and compared to, Tao Te Ching or compared to the Vedas, it's like the Bible is a super recent book. This is always like, I'm uncomfortable talking. I don't mean to upset people by talking about this, but it's kind of like when you teach a course in the history of religion, it's hard to not think about the philosophy of prophecy. If you believe that human beings can speak truth from God, why is it that you have literally hundreds, probably thousands of prophets and they disagree? It's like different revelations give you different ideas. Why exactly is that? It's like presumably if you could have a hotline to God, all revelations would agree. And if the Rig Veda disagrees with the Hebrew Bible, then probably either maybe there's no God or the hotline is faulty, or maybe the receiving end, maybe human beings, as Thomas Hobbes, a very famous atheist, Hobbes says human beings can lie and can make mistakes. So you should, it's possible that you have prophets, says Hobbes, but you can never be sure. Sorry, it's a complete digression, but it's a very interesting thought. I like to think about this as an important reminder. Today we have this, soft nihilism of multiculturalism. Okay, so this religion is here, that religion is there. Let's all have our own corners. Let's not upset each other. But it's like after the Renaissance, it's like Renaissance and religious Reformation, you had wars in Europe, wars of religion. A quarter to a half of European population died over the right interpretation of the Bible. It's just an important reminder. Obviously the 30 Years' War, the most important war of religion, was not just about religion. It was also about politics and power and economics and all the other things. Right? But conflict between Protestants and Protestants and Catholics played a very important role. So it's like a quarter to a half of European population died and ultimately had to agree to disagree. that, we cannot know. And many philosophers, the conclusion that they have drawn, I think a very important, a very radical conclusion, is that all religions must be wrong. Because if one religion was right, God would have stepped in and would have given them the sign. It's like, you see, the Protestants said, no, it's not a knockdown argument. It's not a knockdown, it's an emotional argument. It's an emotional sociological argument. But it's like you have to understand, the Protestants were saying, you Catholics, you have corrupted the Bible. Your popes have lied to us. And in fact, Luther finds mistakes in the Bible, mistranslations, later additions, right? And he throws things freely out of the Bible. I mean, some of the books of the Bible he cannot find in Hebrew, and he says, I don't have the source, so sorry, I have no way to verify the translation, so I can't include them in the Bible anymore. So, interesting critical project, right? And the Protestants say the Catholics have corrupted the Bible, but notice the Protestants themselves were baptized by the Catholics. Luther was baptized by the Catholic Church. So if the Catholic Church is damned and is the work of the devil, it means that Luther was baptized by the workers of the devil, and so therefore it means that Luther himself was not baptized. So it's like the lineage is broken. The lineage is broken, right? And so the hope of the Protestants was that God would show a sign. That God would show a sign. And because God showed no sign, as quarter to a half of the European quarter in Europe as a whole, half in certain places of Europe, especially Central and Eastern Europe, places like Germany or Poland, closer to half of the population died. And as half of the population were dying, a lot of people made the conclusion that probably it's like something is wrong, right? Because if one of the sects was right, God would have shown mercy. And like Hobbes' position, Hobbes is not exactly an atheist; he's really an agnostic. Hobbes is going to say that until God comes down to earth and tells me what is the right interpretation, I insist that I'm a violent militant agnostic. I do not know, and you do not know either. And if you claim to know, you are wrong, dead wrong.
But how was he going to prove that it was God?
Well, yeah, that's a separate question. That's a separate question. But you see, back in the day, I feel that the argument from miracles, people had hope. People had hopes about that. There was a real hope that you could really see real, large-scale miracles. Like maybe one of the sects, you would actually see, people's heads glowing, or people being able to heal the sick, or raising the dead. It's interesting. John Locke actually talks about this in the second treatise of government. You might know Locke, one of the founders of our contemporary liberal political order, right? One of the liberal, inspirations for the liberal constitution. Locke actually writes about something like this in the very beginning of his political treatise. So he says if God would show by a clear manifest sign that this is my heir, then the divine right of kings would work. But because God does not show this sign, then we need to make the social contract. This was the justification, the negative, skeptical justification of the social contract. Because of course all power comes from God, but until God shows with a clear sign who is his chosen, then divine right of kings cannot work. Because you can always have usurpers and pretenders and all the rest of it. Yeah. How much time do we have?
It's actually 1 minute.
20 seconds.
That's a lot of
Okay, colleagues. Let me, because it is my policy to not steal your time. So